Good evening, and welcome to the Nightcap News and Commentary. Sorry, I'm going to mess with my camera here quite a bit. I got my whole setup kind of went wonky on me at the last minute because, of course, right? So, welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. This is Season 1, Episode 8, Our Bloody Valentines. Where we're going to talk about the incredibly toxic relationship that we are all in with the U.S. government. And so we will get to that in a minute. But because it is February, and I said we were going to do positive news this February, I do actually want to start off with two positive stories. The first one is actually a little bit old, and it has to do with the Irish. It's actually an international news story. So, several weeks ago, the Russian Navy announced that it was going to do live war game type drills in Irish waters. And Irish fishermen were like, well, actually, it's our fishing season. So, no, we're gonna keep fishing, and you guys need to not mess with our fishing ships, and this is going to be a big deal, and we're going to put a bunch of fishermen out, and we're going to do this as a protest because no, we don't want you in our waters playing war games. And Russia, as an act of goodwill, they said, decided to go ahead and let that fly and took their war games elsewhere out of Irish waters. So, Erin go bragh, God bless the Irish fishermen. I think that is absolutely lovely. They just said no, and the Russian Navy went, okay. So, that's great. That's probably the best news story we're going to get this year. Like, if I got to the end of the year and that was the coolest, most positive story that I told all year, it just wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Another great news story. Well, this one's kind of comme ci, comme ça great because it shouldn't have happened in the first place. But in San Francisco, the prosecutor has decided to drop charges against a woman who her DNA from her rape kit had been used to charge her in a property crime later. And to the DA's credit, the DA was like, this is illegal and we shouldn't be doing it. And just to say, if it's not illegal, it definitely should be. But I'm pretty sure, at least in California, it's illegal. On the one hand, this is kind of a feel-good story. The DA had a conscience and a sense of moral and ethical judgment and dropped the charges because that's not what we need to be doing with rape kits. On the other hand, there's like, if this one police department in San Francisco is doing it, are they going to be the only police department that's using rape kits that way? Probably not. And like in the story, they talk about how this practice has been going on for quite a while. Now there's going to be an investigation about it. So presumably then there are women sitting in jail and prison right now convicted of crimes that they were linked to based on DNA that was obtained from previous rape kits. And that's not a positive story. That's not something that needs to be. So now it's got some public attention because this DA was, ethical for a hot minute. Let's see if that actually goes anywhere. Are there going to be policy changes, or are city and county governments going to are states going to make policies and laws that address this practice specifically and make it a big fat no, you cannot do that? I'm guessing no. I'm guessing that it'll blow up and it'll be in the news for a couple of days, and that actually, by the time most of you are watching this, that story will have already disappeared. So, but on the other hand, it happened. And so that's almost a good thing. For now, there's some attention on it. And if we keep the pressure up, we might see some actual reform. And that brings us to kind of the heart of tonight's program, which is the really toxic relationship Americans are in with the US government. So there was a poll that came out this week, and it's just this is tough. So this is an approval poll, except that it's really a disapproval poll. Okay, Harris, that's Kamala Harris, vice president, sitting at -9%. Joe Biden sitting at -10%. This is approval ratings. Pence at -13%, McCarthy at -14%, Trump at -15%, Chuck Schumer at -15%, right there with Trump. Nancy Pelosi beating them both at -26%, and the politician we all love to hate, Mitch McConnell, sitting at -34%. Overall, the approval rating, or rather the disapproval rating of the congressional GOP sits at -13%, and for congressional Dems at -14%. We don't much care for most of our representation. And it's funny because guys like Mitch McConnell do keep getting reelected. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. Dark money in politics, big reason for that. These people are allowed to spend a lot of money on advertisements. We spend literally millions and millions of dollars on elections every year, on advertising and campaigning. Other countries with democracies don't do that, FYI. I don't remember what the numbers were that I was reading, but other countries spend a couple of $1,000s at most on their elections. We spend literally millions, and that's taxpayer money. That's money you worked for. That's money that their salaries are paid from your taxes, and then they go and they ask you to donate more money. They're millionaires. They can spend their own money. I mean, the vast majority of the people who are running for higher office make several $100,000 or even $1 million or more. There are not a lot of poor congressmen. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. If you're not wealthy and successful, at least in some way, then people are likely to say, well, they can't run their own lives. How are they going to run the country? And so to some extent, that's a little bit natural. But we're talking about people who are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then they spend millions more in taxpayer money and donations in order to run their campaigns, where they make wild promises that they have no ability or intention of keeping. And the Democrats here are in big trouble over this. So we already talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where I mentioned that there's going to probably be a Republican shellacking here in November 2022. Republicans are going to run their campaigns, and they are going to simultaneously, and yes, they can do this simultaneously. They can simultaneously run their campaigns painting the Biden administration and Democrats as completely feckless, because they are, and also as this huge communist threat, this huge far left radical communist threat, and they can run both of those narratives simultaneously. It will work. Those that aren't caught up in the one will be caught up in the other. Okay, so you've got the Sleepy Joe narrative on the one side, and you've got the they're all radical AOC communists on the other side. And by the way, I'm sure you all know this because, you guys are all my friends for the most part. But AOC isn't considered radical anywhere else in the world. Everywhere else in the world, well, in the Western world, she's considered incredibly moderate, just doing the basic process of governance. Bernie Sanders is considered moderate to conservative. That's how screwed this conversation has gotten. There is no hard left in American politics. Now, there are people in the United States who could be actively categorized as hard left. They're not in government. What we paint as socialists and hard left in the United States are actually just kind of moderately leftish, pretty centrist, actually, given the world narrative. So we've got massive disapproval rating of the Democrats. The Republicans are going to use both narratives to paint the Democrats as utter failures. And the Democrats have been absolute failures. The Build Back Better plan, which was what got Joe Biden elected, kind of. That's a more complicated story. Joe Biden was nobody's first, second, or third pick. He was everybody's we can live with it pick. So there's that. But his Build Back Better plan, which ostensibly is what got him elected, it's what he campaigned on, was supported by the wing of the Democrats known as the Squad, the progressive wing of the Democrats. Now, right from the very beginning, the Republican Party wanted to separate the social spending portion of the Build Back Better agenda from this more solid, concrete infrastructure portion, which included a bunch of corporate giveaways. Okay. And because they wanted to do that, they signaled this early on. And the Democrats jumped up and said, oh, no, we pass the whole thing or it doesn't pass at all. Right up until the 11th hour, when all of a sudden Schumer and Pelosi surrender. Oh, I guess, well, we won't be able to get the votes if we don't separate this. So we're going to have to separate this. And the group of people that said, oh, no, if we separate this, we will never pass the rest of the agenda. Republicans will find a way to block it. That was the progressives. So the progressives are out there actually fighting for the president's stated agenda. And now the media is painting the progressives as being the far left and essentially being the ones who blew up Biden's agenda. Well, no, first of all, Biden blew up his own agenda when he, without a touch of negotiation, went from 6.1 trillion down to 3.5 trillion. And then he halved it again down to 1.5 trillion. So Biden did a bunch of that all by himself. He blew up his own agenda. Corporate Democrats helped him blow up his agenda, and progressives got blamed. Is that the only reason American disapproval of the Biden agenda is so low? No, actually, I wanted to point to this. I don't think it's being reported as like the watershed issue. It kind of is. But 62% of all American voters believe that Biden should cancel some, if not all, of the student loan debt. Now, this includes a slim but measurable majority of Republicans. It includes a very wide majority of African American, Latinos, and women voters. It includes people, this was really interesting about this polling. It included people who did not have and never had any student loan debt of their own. So this is the majority, that was 55%. So the majority of Americans, regardless of political affiliation and whether or not they themselves carried or have ever carried student loan debt, believe that Biden should cancel most, if not all of it. Now, there are some people who want to see it all canceled. The majority of Americans wanted to see a lot of it canceled. Some of it they feel the borrowers should still be responsible for. The Biden administration has already announced its intention to do nothing on that issue. It was wildly popular as a key point during the campaigning, during the promising stage of our elections. Addressing student loan debt was a front and center issue. It got these people into power. It put them in their chairs. And now they're like, I guess we can cancel the child tax credit that was wildly popular, again, in a bipartisan way. We can leave people, whether they got their degrees or not, on the hook for all the student loan debt that we made sure they would never be able to wiggle out of with a bankruptcy or anything else for the rest of their lives. You know, for the privilege of getting an education when we need our people to have an education. But hey, no worries about that. They're doing nothing to fix the rental issues. And every time you talk about any one of these policies that would effectively provide some measure of relief to average Americans, it's a socialist giveaway, it's radical, and somehow just the bringing up of it, even though none of these things have passed, just bringing it up is the fault of progressives. They're saying that the reason the media, the main, well, parts of the mainstream media, certainly on Fox News, but the narrative is starting to pan out like this. The Biden administration, which has not really managed to pass any agenda, whether it was their own very moderate agenda, much less anything radically progressive. Okay. Because they cannot pass anything in this Congress, they are failing, and the American people are angry with them for failing to deliver on their promises. So the media is going to blame the left wing, the actual left wing, the progressive movement, for having an ask they didn't get. And there, Hillary Clinton and all the talking heads are warning that the reason this shellacking is going to happen is because the Democratic Party has moved too far left. It hasn't moved anywhere at all. So we're in this toxic relationship. One of my roommates commented something this afternoon that I thought was really insightful. He said, Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing a better job of representing her constituency than any of these speakers and chairmen and basically most of the um, most of the Congress. So I thought about that and I thought, there's something to that. Marjorie Taylor Greene might be out there uh, spinning horrific untruths and uh, playing this weird, bizarre game that Republicans are playing, this flirtation with fascism. Uh, but in doing so, she's representing a fairly large uh, grouping of Americans who think and talk and believe exactly this way. At least she is speaking what's on their mind. Now, she doesn't have any committee positions. She's been removed from every, place where she could have any actual real power. But she's still a congresswoman, and she's still out there saying exactly what a whole lot of people think. You know who else is out there actually saying what a whole lot of people think? Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And you know who's not out there saying what people actually think? Ted Cruz, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy. They aren't representing the interests of you and me at all. But we're stuck in a toxic relationship with them. It's like going out on a Valentine's Day date where you basically get stood up and stiffed for the bill at the same time. And then they send you messages forever after asking you to donate even more money for what? So that they can bicker and about doing anything that might actively benefit the lower and middle class working society that keeps the entire nation running. It's nuts. It's like they have no concept of what it is to govern, what their job is. I cannot think of it right now, but I have just seen some headlines this week, and it was all piddly stuff. That's why I can't remember it. They're going to pass this little thing in this state, and this weird thing in this state. We're passing book bans, but not a free lunch program. Like, how ignorant does our government want our children to grow up being? Are they we've got a ton of science that says what kids need in order to learn. You know what they need? They need healthy food. They need plenty of rest. They need lots of playtime, not too much homework. They need to be encouraged in their studies. We know what children need to learn and engage and develop that love of learning. There's science behind it. There's decades and decades and decades of science behind what it takes for children to learn. And it's like state governments looked at all that science and went, that would require effort and it would be cost effective. And then, oh my goodness, children could actually think for themselves, and we can't have that. So let's do the opposite. Let's make poor families pay money we know they don't have and break their own banks to try to make sure that their kids have a hot lunch, because the state can't be on the hook for feeding the children. And while we're at it, let's take any book we have decided might be remotely subversive or controversial and take it out of their libraries. What world are we living in that the adults are like, oh, kids, you shouldn't read? And we're doing it bald-faced, just in front of everybody. making millions and millions of dollars on finding justifications to screw people. And here's what they've got to show for it. We are going to fix the bridges because we super need you guys to be able to get to work so you can keep paying taxes. That's it. Going to fix those bridges because you need to get to work and we need you to be able to get to work. And that is bare minimum, okay? Road construction and upkeep, it's been, a basic function of government, not a big deal function of government since the Roman Empire. Really. And we're the United States, greatest country on earth. Look, we passed a bill to fix our bridges that we let collapse because we could never be bothered to invest in the basic mechanisms of government. We created bloated bureaucracies that accomplish nothing, that study problems but don't implement the solutions the studies reveal. I will never understand the gap between what we know in academia, what is taught in every college campus, and for that matter, a great many high schools, and what actually occurs in the real world. And to top it all off, our date in this toxic relationship is a narcissistic gaslighter. Because if you bring this up to the Kirsten Sinemas, the Kevin McCarthys, the Mitch McConnells, the Nancy Pelosi's, they will dismiss the concerns of average people as being, that's just a few people. No, it's not. No, it's not. The policies that progressives are pushing for are not progressive. In fact, everything about calling most progressives progressive at all is pretty misleading, because we're talking about a fairly central, moderate core of average Americans who see corporate greed and government spending bloat get away with literal murder and a slew of other crimes, and just go, oh, tee-hee, I committed 18 property felonies, but I'm worth millions of dollars, so nobody's going to do anything about it. Versus the IRS deciding to crack down on anybody who got paid more than $600 on their Etsy project. This is why I said a couple of weeks ago, anarchy begins at the top. So we're in this horrible date, and every time we bring it up, hey, you're not treating us particularly well, and we kind of have a problem with the way that you're governing. It's like, oh, you guys should feel lucky. We represent you. I have your concerns at heart. We care. Bunch of ad misericordiam advertising to follow. That's Latin for appeal to emotion. It's a logical fallacy. Whenever you bring up facts and statistics, they almost always pivot to some heartstring argument. Whataboutism. Well, we'd love to be able to help refugees and immigrants, but what about our own veterans? Okay, what about our own veterans? Well, we'd love to be able to help our veterans, but what about the landlords? We don't have enough housing, but we're not going to do anything to solve that problem. There was a whole town in California that attempted to declare itself. Now, mind you, they got laughed at and it was all overturned, but they attempted to declare themselves a wildlife refuge for mountain lions rather than to be forced to build affordable housing. They didn't, I mean, sort of ultimate NIMBY case. They didn't want to have their homes next to slightly poorer people's homes. Forget the fact that having duplexes and homes stabilizes people so that they can come up in the world. Having affordable housing is the first step to being able to move ahead. So I'm going to take this opportunity to read some comments here. I see we've got new people in the channel tonight, so thank you. Welcome, welcome. The 42, my dear friend, Kat and Peter. Thank you so much for being here. Fred, thank you so much for being here. John, good evening to you too. Fred Eater, learning should be free. I completely agree. Learning absolutely should be free. Like, when we invest in the education of our society, we're literally investing in the success of our society. Why you wouldn't just do that on principle is beyond me. And more interestingly, education is free, as in no out-of-pocket costs. It's paid for with taxpayer money all the way up to the senior year in high school. So what is so radically different about college that makes it so that we have to charge for that in particular? We managed it for 12 years and we can't manage it for 8 more? I don't understand that. It would have been a totally radical outcome. They would have been able to pass something other than gas. Yeah. Yep, if they could pass something other than gas, that would be, at this point, completely radical. Let's see here. There are lots of Americans afraid of the gazpacho police. Oh yeah. Oh, Marjorie, I'm so sorry, but when you make a mistake like that, you're going to get roasted for a long time. And don't worry, I won't pick on you in particular. Assuming anybody else guffaws this year nearly that badly, I'll make sure to get them too. A third party winning an election would be a great start, Fred Eater. Yeah. So all the talk about third parties is, on the one hand, totally necessary. And on the other hand, I feel like it's such a brick wall we're running into, because nothing about the way the entire structure of our system is currently set up gives any third party the same platform as Democrats and Republicans. Everything about the whole setup from the word go is on this two-party system. We don't even let independents or Green parties debate on the same stage as Republicans and Democrats. And so until we fix the infrastructure that makes it so that I can go into any town or any city in this country, I can find the GOP office, the Republican Party office, and I can find a DNC office. I cannot find a Forward Party office. I cannot find a Green Party office. I cannot find an Independent Party office, the Libertarian office. I can't find the National Socialists of America office Not that I would want to. I'm just saying all the other parties are left out of the delegate conversation. Like, they have no delegates. They have no offices, or, well, very few offices. They certainly don't have an office in every city. They have no voter outreach system. They don't have the same infrastructure in any way, shape, or form that would allow them to compete on the national level. And the media, which largely controls the flow of how election coverage is handled, has no interest. Like, they actively work to keep them out. There's no effort to fold those third parties in. And so until we make a big enough stink about addressing the mechanisms of that, we're not going to get very far just saying, hey, we need third parties. We need third parties. Well, we have a bunch of them, and we're not managing to do anything with them because the structure surrounding third parties is, there is no infrastructure there. It's why Bernie Sanders, even though he was able to run in Congress as an independent, as soon as he went for that presidential run, he had to make himself a Democrat. Otherwise, it would not have mattered at all how eloquently he made his argument. He wasn't going to get nearly as far as he did get. And even running as a Democrat, he had that establishment machine to crush all semblance of independent ideas from him. John Harbeck, thank you for this comment. Banning books, where else has that happened in history? Nowhere good. Yeah, history doesn't ever remember the people who burned and banned books in a particularly positive light. And it's strange to me that Republicans are engaging so heavily in this, in that Republicans are also the ones out loud screaming the most about thought control when it comes to the vaccines, when it comes to telling of Black history, when it comes to a lot of other subjects. They're convinced that the left is engaging in thought control. No, thought control looks like banning books. That's thought control. Just so we're clear. A home is a human right. Thank you, Fred Eater. And the 42 fully agree. Yeah, a home is a human right. It more or less says so in the Declaration of Independence, but only if you read the subtext. So let me explain. So endowed by their creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that is the case, then you have to understand that you need a certain economic ground for life and liberty to occur, much less the pursuit of happiness. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't work on the pursuit of happiness, which you ostensibly have a right to, if you can't keep your feet on the same ground from constantly shifting. And we've literally priced people out of not just the owning their home market, we have priced people out of the rental market. And so all of those people are then no longer capable of pursuing their right to pursuit of happiness. Their liberty is significantly curtailed, and long-term poverty is lethal. So not having housing is a violation of, well, not having affordable access to housing is a violation of basic human rights. And by the way, I may have worded that that specific way. That's my own wording, but That's international law. I didn't pull that out of anywhere. That's in the International Human Bill of Rights. So, yes, housing is a human right, and we have it locked up in a capitalist venture. So, as long as we keep human necessities, specifically food and housing, locked into a fully capitalist model, we are going to see people constantly priced out of their basic right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're not even governing anymore. Our government is no longer committed to its own basic constitution, its own basic Bill of Rights. It shows it on every single level, from law enforcement to education to even thinking about addressing the housing crisis. And for all that you're about to hear about inflation, particularly out of the right wing, why are we still trying to do all this spending when inflation is afoot? They didn't show up for the votes at the Fed that would have helped curtail inflation. The Republicans, that is. Democrats showed up to address inflation. But Republicans can't be seen participating in anything that might give Joe Biden a win, so they didn't even do their jobs. They didn't even show up to vote. How is that Republicans representing you? We know how the Biden administration is failing the country. We know how Democrats have just absolutely failed to deliver on the wild, progressive sounding promises they made during the campaign. And the Republicans are failing you too. Don't let them sit there and try to pin it all on the Democrats. First of all, they're actively undermining the Democrats. That's all they do now. That's what Republicans do now, is actively undermine Democrats. And Democrats let them because Democrats also benefit from that. The corporate left hand feeds the corporate right hand. What do we do about it? We can sit here, we can complain about these problems all we want. What do we do about it? Get involved in your local politics. Become a precinct captain. Become a committee person. Get involved in your county's politics, in your state's politics. Become a chairman, a delegate, a volunteer. Make your voice heard. It's going to take more than voting. It's going to take more than boycotting with your dollars. Okay? We have to put you and me in every nook and cranny in government. We have to say, if we want these third-party offices, if we want to create a room for third-party delegates in our elections, then we the people, it is our right and in fact our responsibility to govern ourselves. Okay, that is the responsibility of citizens in a republic and a democracy. We have to be responsible for governing ourselves. That's something that the media and the government would very much like to gloss over. It's your right to say, then let's start building those offices. It's your right to say, I'm going to run for chairperson in my county. I'm going to run for water board. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to become a part of the solution. But we have to, each and every one of us. Otherwise, we're just sitting here talking and it's all so much gas. Thank you. Thank you for the gas comment. So let's see, let's get to more. It's the same with healthcare. Absolutely. It's the same with healthcare. And that's something else they ran on. We're going to lower prescription drug prices. Did they pass the bills to lower prescription drug prices? Nope. No, they didn't. Are they expanding Medicare for all? There have been some bills for expanding Medicare for all. I don't know if any of them this particular legislative session have passed. States have been passing their own expansions, some Democratic states. On the federal level, have they been making any headway, any progress with that? No. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if we'd made more progress on psilocybin and marijuana laws than we have on any actual bit of governance. Just because those are wildly popular. This is something else the Democrats have been doing lately, which is to virtue signal their support for getting marijuana off the Schedule 1 list, which it definitely should not be on the Schedule 1 list, right? That puts it in the same category as fentanyl. But it's still on the Schedule 1 list, so they haven't actually managed to do that. And again, it's all so much playing to the younger voters. It's just lip service. And we elected them because they told us, we're going to represent you on these things. No, but they didn't. They don't. Let's see here. The lack of means of Fred Eater. The lack of means of survival creates desperate people. Desperate people commit crimes they wouldn't commit if they weren't desperate. It's true. And I'm always a little bit hesitant to get into that argument because it makes it sound like poor people are more criminal than rich people. And that is not exactly the case. The types of crimes that poor people and rich people commit are different. And it is also true that, yes, in poor neighborhoods, there's more crime. Specifically, there tends to be more violent crime. Now, there's a lot of crime at the top. And we act like that's somehow different crime. It's not. And people get hurt. A lot of people get hurt by the sort of the crimes of corruption cause damage, particularly, again, to those poorer, more desperate people who then are the ones characterized as the criminals. But poor people also tend to lack the nutrition needed for higher brain function. Poverty alone creates a 13-point drop in IQ. If you are under constant stress, that's a 10 to 13-point drop in IQ. Stressed out people just rapidly lose certain levels of higher cognition. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs in action. So then they are more impulsive. And they're more emotional because they never get to that level of emotional stability. How can they? They're constantly worried. They're constantly struggling. And on top of that, they're probably not getting enough sleep, which is absolutely necessary for proper cognition. They're not getting the education that is absolutely necessary for clear thinking. And they're not getting the food that is also absolutely necessary for all higher functions. So it creates this perfect storm. And then they go out there and they behave the way that people do when their basic needs are not being met. And then we blame them for behaving the way that people do when their basic needs are not being met. It's just vicious. And we look to these politicians, oh, save us from this poverty. They're not coming. They're not coming. They are too busy right now realizing that Americans are fed up with them, and so they're just raking it in as fast as they can. They really think that their money is going to save them at the end of the day. Well, the pendulum always swings backwards, so rest assured. It won't be forever. But in order for it to not be forever, we have got to take responsibility for ourselves. We've got to jump in the fray, and we've got to say it's going to take more than my vote. It's going to take my action. I want to get to a few more comments here. Look into setbacks for houses and why we have short fences in the front yard. Okay, I will look into that. I'm not sure about short fences. I do know that one of the problems in the housing market right now is that investment firms are buying up houses at an incredible rate. So that is raising the cost of housing, and they not only bought up lots and lots of family homes, like private single dwelling family homes, but then they also began buying up hotels, motels, and rental housing, like duplexes and apartment complexes and stuff like that. So everything's going up because real estate has now become the playground of venture and investment capitalists. The 42 ranked voting would help a lot. Yeah, star voting. So this is alludes a little bit also to what I said about Joe Biden. Do you guys remember during the primary campaigns, people were kind of writing out their list of all the candidates? So this would be my first pick. This is my second. This is my third. That is basically ranked choice voting. Joe Biden got elected because he was basically the highest common denominator. So he's nobody's first choice. He's nobody's second choice. But it turns out that he's a ton of people's third and fourth choice. That's how he got elected. Now, what we need to do is create what we all did, on our Facebook pages as our voting system, so that you would choose to vote. Here's my number one choice. Here's my number two choice. Here's my number three choice. So on and so forth. And that would help immensely. It would give third parties, candidates, a much better shot of being in on that conversation. It would make them much bigger contenders. But also, we have to choose. We have to get in there and find ways to create laws and room that says, Green Party gets X amount of delegates. Yeah, where's the Green Party's delegates? Where's the Libertarian Party delegates? We have to create that situation because it doesn't exist. We need universal basic income. Fred Eater, we need universal basic income to keep everyone housed and fed. It's the first and most important step in saving our country. Yeah, if your citizens are in a constant state of distress, how can you get up there on the world stage and talk about what a great country you are? You've got 3.5 to 3.5 to 4.1 million Americans living in a constant state of distress, and they have been for decades, and you're doing nothing about it. What is great about that? Oh, okay. So the front yard fences thing, uh, the 42 says you could have a business or a large garden in your front yard before those rules were added. Some people started making lead acid batteries and selling them at other toxic businesses. Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. Instead of making regulations on these businesses, the rich took it as an opportunity to stop all front yard businesses. Of course they did. Yeah, the idea of home-based businesses has always been a kind of a threat to the corporate model, the corporate office model. And in some places, there's specific zoning against it. In other places, they just make it as difficult as possible. Now, the internet came along and helped with a lot of that. Lots and lots of people are running home-based businesses now. That's awesome sauce, but we're also now talking about those people as being not wanting to work because we don't recognize self-employment as legitimate employment in a lot of areas. Like, I could be making cute little elf ears and selling them online, cute little jewelry elf ears or whatever, and selling them online. Uh, and that's self-employed. But, the way the media tells it, I'm one of those people who doesn't want to work. So, yeah, we really need to think about this toxic relationship we're in with our government. It is like being on a bad date with a narcissist who's constantly telling us that it's our fault, that we just want too much. No, no, that's not how this works. And we need to call it out. And we need to find better dates. So, get involved in your local politics. You can go down somewhere in your downtown area, first thing on Monday, and you can look up your local DNC, or for that matter, your local RNC office, and you can get involved. If you belong to Forward Party, if you belong to the Libertarian Party, find your fellow libertarians in your area. You guys don't have an office? Make an office. You guys don't have a party platform agenda? Make one. Start representing yourselves. Make yourselves heard. Get on the ballots. Become a part of the solution. It's all we can do. Because this is a very toxic relationship. And the narcissist is never the one who's going to break up with you, right? They need this relationship. We do not. So anyway, that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, sorry that one was so dark. I was trying so hard for positive stuff in February, but I guess those winter winds are not quite done with us yet. So I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, the 42, Katie and Peter, for jumping in the chat here and being a part of the show. I love it when people jump in and be and are a part of this. I needed to say thank yous to a couple of people, Kay Ninjita, who is constantly contributing to my page, my Facebook page, and has been a big supporter of the show. Thank you so much. Melissa, Melinda, Jasmine, Wade, everybody who has been with me, arguing with me or agreeing with me or encouraging me every step of the way here. Melanie, um, thank you all so much. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening. As always, my dear friends, live long and prosper.